You guys want to learn about conformity? Do you guys see yourselves as conformists? No?
I hope not.
Who doesn't? Ever hands up? Who feels like they don't conform? Come on, don't be shy. This is kind of working the opposite of how I wanted it to, because all the people, there are like 15 of you with MacBooks right now. And I was hoping that you'd be the ones raising your hands. But it's the people without MacBooks who are raising their hands. So it's almost like, it's interesting, because I think like the tagline for Macs,
Think different, isn't it? I think.
you said join a cult? Yeah.
Their
Tagline
slogan is "Think different."
Mac,
isn't
right.
it? I don't know.
Think different, But then the people who don't think they're, and so the people who did not see themselves as conformists were the ones that didn't have Macs. I don't want to think too deeply about this. A bunch of you have MacBooks, okay? And the tagline for Macs are to think differently. So that's funny to me. I'm the same way. Like I have a Mac. I'll always have a Mac. Macs are the best. At the same time, I am different. Or at least I feel that way. And so that's an example of conformity, when we do things that other people do because other people are doing them. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the different reasons why we conform, the different social influences, okay, that cause us to conform. And we're going to talk about positive influences or impacts of conformity and negative impacts of conformity, and then why we obey. I have this nifty. This is literally what it looks like for me sometimes. And so we hear don't be a conformist, but conforming is a part of human nature. We can't help it. We conform because it is natural. And the reason why it's natural is probably because it helped us. Can you guys see how or why conforming would be a positive, why we would be programmed to conform? Someone other than Anton, because you always have good comments. Yes. That's not true.
Because we're very social, creatures and stuff, and it's a way to find people with common interests and stuff, and so we can group together, live together, and have our people, I guess.
Okay, because we are social, we
Yeah.
enjoy being social. We enjoy we have a social need, and so conforming helps us reach that goal.
Yeah.
Okay, Alicia.
Probably also for survival instincts.
Mhm.
If you're in an area where you're not really certain on how to do things or how to keep yourself in a stable part of life, if
Mhm.
somebody else knows how to function well in that environment, you're going to copy them.
Right. So if we're with a group, there's a better chance that we will be around someone who knows what to do, because I don't know what to do. In fact, if a fire breaks out, I'm going to be following one of you guys. Kiara?
Throughout history, in certain cultures, people are taught that you have to do what everybody else is. If you stand out, either you will be killed
Uh-huh.
or you will face severe punishment.
Right. So, in what kind of culture do you think you would be more likely to face a severe punishment for not conforming? Would a Western culture, or a Western, or what's the other one? Eastern. Yeah. Eastern. Right. There's so many ways of saying it. Western, Eastern, individualistic, collectivist. I don't know. Right. And so, in Eastern cultures, we actually do have a stronger consequences for not conforming. And so just a simple. I think everyone knows intuitively what conformity means, but in terms of a psychological definition, we say a change in one's behavior due to the real or imagined influence of other people. What are some examples in this class of examples where people conformed? Maybe when it wasn't good for them. Not like literally in this class, but like things we covered in the textbook. Yeah. Remember when you all came together to beat me up that one time? Sorry?
It's a good time.
Oh, good time. Yeah.
That's why we did so well in the last class.
Can you guys think of examples that we've covered from the material from the class? The cults. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have the Heaven's Gate cult and the Jonestown folks, right? They all kind of conformed with each other and died together. Jenny, did you want to add to that?
Just kind of like the kind of comparison.
Sure.
We conform to like help with our self-esteem.
Totally, right? And so I think one way that people define self-esteem, and I don't know if I define it that way in this class, but just the amount of friends you have, self-esteem, some people see it directly related to the number of friends you have. And so you can see why it would be good to be part of a group. Sorry? Drugs? So yeah, fraternity activities. That's this one thing. Okay. So you guys know examples. Like we just talked about 2 examples of how conformity can lead to horrible mistakes. But you guys know about the Nuremberg trials?
Yeah.
Okay. Does someone want to explain what happened in the Nuremberg trials, or?
Was when like after World War II, Nazi soldiers went on trial for like doing horrible acts, even though they were just following orders.
Yeah, and so what was their response on trial? Whenever they were confronted, you just said it.
Like they were just following.
Yeah, I
orders.
was just following orders, right?
Like
Society.
it's not like I wanted to do it; I had to do it.
That was not an accepted answer. Obviously, we were just following orders. Okay. I'm debating whether we have enough time to actually go ahead and listen to this. Do you guys know about the authorization of use of military force? Okay. Do you? Anyone? No. So that's pretty much right after September 11th. People were frantic, and rightfully so. And so, a lot of people felt that there needed to be a reaction, and that there were too many bureaucratic processes standing in the way of the United States making quick and direct action. Okay. So this bill came into the Senate or the Congress called the Authorization of Use of Military Force, which pretty much gave the president substantial, unlimited power to use force in another country, pretty much to declare war. Okay. Interestingly, even though most of the Congress members regret voting for this and letting it pass, it almost passed unanimously. Only one person did not vote yes on this. Okay, and like I said, a lot of people look back and they're like, man, how did we all conform to give the president so much power to go into a country and use military force? Okay. Can you guys think of of how something like this could have happened, considering the circumstances, the cost.
People are scared.
Yes, people are scared, right? And why are they scared? Is it too obvious of a question?
No, it's. You want me to answer it?
Yeah, go for it.
No, because we thought that. I guess as a culture, as a country, we thought we were being attacked by. We were attacked. We thought that we were under attack by something
Right, exactly.
more beyond what actually happened.
Right, exactly. And so we're gonna cover a little bit of that today as a reason for why people can conform. Let me show this. You guys know about this movie?
Never heard of it.
Compliance. Pretty good movie.
Have some good stars.
Does it?
It's just on
Oh, a lot of. I thought you meant like movie stars.
No.
But so you guys remember when we talked about? You guys remember when we talked about the authorization of use of military force? Okay, and we talked about how that was an example of like fear, and like being scared could lead someone to conform. How is this situation different? Different. Well, so they both involve conforming, right? But what did this have that the other example did not have as a reason for conformity?
An authority figure.
Yes, exactly. An authority figure. So someone that people saw like as an expert, telling them what to do. Okay, so that's another reason, another thing that can make us conform. Okay, so we have fear, and now we have an expert or an authority figure telling us what to do. Really messed up situation. Okay. So in terms of like the two overarching reasons why people conform, relate back to that, to the first day of lecture. Okay, we conform because we want to be accepted. Okay, so this would fall into like the need to have high self-esteem, like Jenny was saying. And because we may not know what to do in an ambiguous situation. And other people might know what to do. Okay. And so you can see how social influence would play a large part. Okay, for one thing, we tend to underestimate the power of a social situation on a person's behavior, and this is evident in fundamental attribution theory. So we're not always aware that a social situation could have such a strong influence on us that we would conform to something. Okay, and that is evident when we think about Jonestown and you wonder, how could people do this? It is appalling. Okay. And we also might not have enough information about what to do in a situation. Okay. So instead, we use other people as a guide for our own behavior. Okay. And again, I kind of jumped the gun on this, but this falls into our need to be accurate and need to be accepted. When we conform because of our need to be accurate, that's called informational social influence. When we conform because of our need to be accepted, that's called normative social influence. Okay, so informational social influence is most likely to cause us to conform if we're in a situation that we're confused about. For example, would you want to know how long you should wait until texting or calling someone after a date? A lot of times we ask our friends what to do because we have no idea. Or we're wondering, how do I eat sushi? Do I just stick the whole thing in my mouth at once? Or do I cut it in half before eating? How would you cut a piece of sushi in half when you're eating with chopsticks? I don't know. That's confusing. So I look to see what the other person's doing. Hopefully they're not looking to see what I'm doing. Okay? And in general, if we're in a situation where we're confused about what to do, then this is a strong predictor of conforming. And the way we conform is we look at what other people are doing in the same confusing situation and then do what they do. Okay? Pretty much we look for someone who looks like they know what they're doing, and then we follow their behavior. That's called informational social influence. Okay? And this is a great example of informational social influence. Oh. This study is done, 75% of people report the fire when they are alone, but that's still 25% of people.
25 people just do it.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh my God. I don't know. I might stay. I don't know.
I mean, it was a good life, right?
Yeah. But only 10% report when only 2 people are there, not doing anything. So all it takes is 2 people, right? Okay, so there are 2 types of compliance. Okay, and so when we say compliance, we mean the person who sees the smoke, when he doesn't leave because no one else is leaving, that's called compliance. Okay, when the person calling into the restaurant pretending to be a police officer and making the manager do like sick and perverted things to the teenager, when the manager listens to him, that's called compliance. Okay, and there are 2 types of compliance. There's public compliance and there's private acceptance. Public compliance, so you can necessarily have one without the other. So I can publicly comply, like I can do something, I can go along and do something, but that doesn't mean that I privately accept what's happening. Okay? So private acceptance is actually doing something because you genuinely believe that it's the right thing to do in the situation. Interestingly, informational social influence result in public compliance and private acceptance. Can you guys think of, or maybe we'll get to this later, but I don't know. I feel like you can publicly comply, obviously, without having private acceptance. And we'll talk about examples of that. Okay. Obviously, informational social influence can backfire. So you guys know we talked about the bystander effect a little bit. You guys know what that is? That's demonstrates the concept of diffusion of responsibility. When
You don't do something
Did you think other people were going to do something about it?
exactly, yeah. So it was conceptualized when Kitty Genovese was murdered in like a public setting and no one did anything about it. Pretty much the explanation was that, well, no one was doing, or like, no one was doing anything, so it probably is not a big deal. Jenny?
Oh, I call you Jen.
I'm sorry, what is your name?
Jen.
It's just Jen? Okay. Jen.
Um,
Everyone else was calling you Jenny.
I went to a bystander effect training thing, and actually showed us actual experiments of people pretending to get
Mm.
sick or pass out in the middle of the street and nobody does anything.
Right,
Unless
yeah,
they look like a certain type of professional dress or
Right.
compared to
totally.
something
Yeah.
else.
So there are actually a lot of reasons why the bystander effect happens. We're actually going to cover that later on. Like there are 5 main reasons for the bystander effect. One of them related to informational social influence. Obviously, that stuff has an effect too, right? If you think this person is, we think that the person we're coming across on the ground is like a homeless person, and that they're supposed to be there, then we're more likely not to do anything. Other examples of informational social influence, war crimes. Okay, we talked about this with the Nuremberg trials. Okay, fraudulent criminal actions. That is the deplorable person who convinced the manager to strip search the teenager. Okay, and social contagion. I don't know if I want to cover this. This is under very rare circumstances, emotions or behaviors can spread rapidly throughout a crowd, and so in the news, this mysterious tick was rapidly spreading in upstate New York, and I think the idea was that it was spreading because people were seeing other people acting in weird ways, and somehow that caused some sort of panic, which then caused them to manifest those same weird behaviors, and that's called mass psychogenic illness. Pretty much weird physical symptoms that spread without any real explanation or any physical cause. Okay. A better way to kind of think about this is the Salem witch trials. Okay. And how people were freaking out because they thought that everyone was a witch, and this panic spread rapidly, and pretty much everyone was accusing everyone of being a witch.
There was also that thing of that case of people who just danced until they died.
Danced until they died.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was something I learned about in high school. It was in the 1500s where just 400 people danced
That
for
makes me
days on end.
think about the Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode. You guys know that one?
Yeah.
The dance context to keep their bar. That was good. Kind of unrelated, but it's good. And so 3 reasons why when people will conform, and know this for the exam. Okay, we conform when information is ambiguous. We don't really know how to act. In a time of crisis, so like war or a smoke-filled room. And when we're listening to an expert or someone we perceive to be an expert. We all good with this slide? I guess that's all we have, the time we have to cover today. We went over the exam, and then we went over informational social influence.
Yes.
Okay. And we'll cover normative social influence next week. That's when people conform because of their need to be accepted. Okay, guys.
Like I said.
So we talked about the broadly that there are two different reasons why we conform, two different types of social influence. And what was the first one? Informational social influence. So that is when we are influenced to conform to a group because of our need to be accurate, okay? And this is more likely to happen in situations that are ambiguous, okay? And, when there is fear or when an expert is involved, okay? And so I showed you the video of the person in the room with other people, and then like smoke comes into the room, and even though like their life could be in danger and they would die in like a matter of minutes, if no one else in the room does anything, then you're less likely to like flee the scene. And I also showed you the compliance video in which someone pretending to be an expert influenced a manager to strip search a teen. Okay, and what was different in that scenario versus the fire scenario is that there was an expert, an authority figure. Okay, so these are different types of influences under the umbrella of informational influence that cause you to conform. Actually, let's go back to the slide. Okay, right here. So when information is ambiguous, okay, when it's a time of crisis, and when we're listening to an expert. And this is related to our need to be accurate. But we also have another need, right? What is our other need, Whitney?
Self-esteem.
Need to have high self-esteem. Okay? And when our need to have high self-esteem causes us to conform, this is called normative social influence. Okay? And it's related to anything that helps us have higher self-esteem. So, for instance, certain group expectations, conformity can lead to acceptance. Like if I do what this group is doing, then they will be more likely to accept me. So all my friends are going to get Chinese food, but I want Thai food, but I don't want them to be annoyed with me, and I don't want to not hang out with my friends. So I'm going to eat some Chinese food. Okay. because sometimes when people do not conform, we eventually label them as deviants. And deviants are rejected. So normative social influence, the influence of other people that leads us to conform in order to be liked and accepted by them. Just some more on that. We are social species. There are a lot of benefits to social attention. We have a need for affection, support, and love. And other people have a really high influence on our self-esteem. And isolation is really traumatic. Okay, so one of the worst forms of punishment in prison is solitary confinement. This time last year, I came down, I had pneumonia, and I couldn't leave my room, and I couldn't even teach, and for like a month, and it was horrible. And so I just conformed to everything. No, I'm kidding. Whitney?
Do they feed them 3 times a day or once a day in solitary?
Oh, I don't have any personal experience with that. Wink, wink. No. But if anyone does, no.
3 times. I think it is 3 times.
Okay, so they just like open like a little,
Yeah.
and just like throw it in there.
I think it has to be 3 times a day.
I think somebody declared it unethical for anybody to be in solitary confinement.
Oh,
I think
okay.
The U.S. is one of the last standing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because we're not necessarily about rehab.
No.
We're
No.
about like
Oh, I know that.
destroy the evil and rehab it.
Okay. I'm debating whether I should share this video. It's kind of funny. It's just 2 people driving off a cliff.
Is that all?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. So what happened there? Okay, so we're using a lot of cognitive facts. Why do they do this? I should just get rid of this slide. That was dumb. That was yeah, it was so dumb though.
So
Okay.
why did they do the drag in the first place?
Yeah, why was this
Was it peer pressure?
peer
Peer
pressure?
pressure to it's self-esteem. It's proving
Because
So-
neither one of them wanted to say that they were a chicken.
Right,
They
exactly.
needed to maintain that self-esteem
Right.
and their social standing in the group.
But the idea that this was even like an acceptable behavior for the group, you know, speaks to like the importance of social norms, right? Intertangled with, yeah, wanting to be cool,
Clearly
you know.
that culture was like,
Yeah.
"Well, try that."
I mean,
His hair looks
Yeah,
good.
but you'd see that
Before you
still.
die.
yeah, his
I
hair
bet you'd
looks.
see that still. I'm not gonna lie.
You want to see it again? You said.
No.
Okay,
I'm-
good.
I think.
Still today.
Yeah, you'd probably see that still today.
Probably.
You want to try it?
Yeah.
No.
Chicken
Yes.
run, yeah. It still happens.
Okay. So do you remember when I talked about informational social influence and I said that it leads people to public compliance and also private acceptance? Okay. Well, normative social influence can lead to public compliance. So you do something even though you don't have private acceptance. Okay, and I'm sure this is applicable to your lives. Okay, I don't know. Some of us go to college because we feel that that is the right thing to do, but the whole time we think that it's stupid. You know, some of us get PhDs, and the whole time we're like, why are we doing this? Okay, but on like a more regular level. You know, like, I don't know, one thing my friends like to do is that like two of my best friends is when we get food, even if we're like at like a sit down restaurant, they want to take it home and eat it, you know. And so like it's like we just got our food, but then they want to like get it wrapped up and eat it at home. But I'm hungry. Like I just waited a long time for my food.
Do they plan to like take it home? Or
They're
do
always
do
like-
Do you guys get a table, you sit down, you order, and then they're like.
Well, it'll be like a Panera Bread or something, or you know, like it's like a sit down, but not like a nice sit down restaurant, you know. And like we'll get our food. And I'm like, oh, like it's time to eat. And they're like, all right, let's take it home. And I'm like, we gotta walk to the car, gotta drive in the car, gotta park in the parking spot, gotta park from the parking spot home, and it's noon already, and I'm hungry, you know. But I publicly comply, you know. I don't want them to be like, God, like Ali, like just does not go with the flow. Yeah, high maintenance, you know. But privately, different story, you know. Like
quick fix, let them drive, and then you eat your food in the
I
car.
do that a lot. Or like I eat while we walk.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Especially if we're on
But then
campus.
it's like not the same.
I come off as a weirdo, you know. So that's like a mix between public compliance and private acceptance, right? Because I'm like,
Angrily munching
Yeah.
down.
yeah, exactly, yeah. But that's what normative social influence do. If I was alone, I would never not eat. You know, I would never. But I'm with, you know, two of my friends. I want them to like me, even if I feel pretty, like we've been friends for years, best friends for years. You know, and like I still would get really uncomfortable if they were annoyed with me. Actually, this kind of all came to surface at the conference, you know, because I was like, I feel like you guys always want to take your food and eat somewhere else. And they were like, where is this coming from? They're like, that's not true. This never happens. Like,
Is it gonna happen
they're like,
every
when
day?
has this happened? And like, I couldn't come up with all the times that it happened, right? Because I'm not actually like scorekeeping,
Right.
you know?
Hate that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
My husband all the time. It
Yeah,
drives me nuts.
It's
But
the
good
most
for
annoying
you. I
thing.
was gonna ask if you ever like actually. discussed
Yeah,
it with
I mean, it
them.
came out in a sideways and bad way, but
But, like,
thank you. Yeah,
but,
yeah.
like, now, like, they spitefully make sure we sit down at a
Exa-
restaurant.
well, I think it's more like now, like subconsciously, they want to keep acting the same way to see
Right.
how I react.
Right,
I don't know, and so
exactly.
now I have to.
To see
You,
if
you should just
really-
take out a notepad and like that's another mark.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wednesday the 24th.
When
Right.
it's your birthday, be like, we're sitting down.
Yeah, yeah. It's
I was
my.
gonna say, like, would you ever, if you're actually just really starving in that moment, would you sort of fight to stay there, or would you still?
That's a good point because my friends were like, "Well, you never say anything," and I'm like, "Well, I hint at it, you know, passively."
Eating on the road.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll shove my burrito in my mouth before we get to the car. Is
Yeah.
that saying
When you're hangry.
Could that difference be in someone's personality though? Could that change it?
You mean someone who has like a different personality might be better at publicly complying?
By saying or not publicly comply, saying no or here.
Oh,
Or even if they do.
yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like I'm not great at publicly complying, you know? And, you know, I don't want to stray too far away from the information, but I think there's a type of way, and we might talk about this a little bit, in which you can, you know, like kind of like voice your opinion, but not in a way that sounds like you're like trying to be deviant from the group, you know. You guys know Ash's study? Okay. Ash's study. Okay, so pretty much there's one participant in a room with like 6 other people. They think that the 6 other people are also are also part of the experiment, but they're actually confederates of the experimenter. Okay? And so they present these 3 lines, and they ask you, and they present another line, and they ask you to compare them. Okay? So which one does this compare to? 2, right? And so they go around the room, okay? And the first few times, everyone gives the right answer, okay? And then after a while, everyone starts giving the wrong answer. And what the experimenter is looking at is if you start giving the wrong answer in order to conform with the group. Okay?
Like all the other people were actors, like told to get their own answer.
Exactly. And they find that 2/3 of the time, you do conform to the group. Okay? You either convince yourself that the line is shorter or is the same length, or sometimes you do it simply just because you don't want to look different than the group.
Does it depend on so if those other two lines were significantly shorter, would they still?
Oh, you mean if it was like 2 feet long? Yeah,
Right.
no.
There wasn't, I remember seeing a video of this line, and there actually was like a really, really huge discrepancy between two lines,
They still-
but they still went for the line that everybody else chose because they, yeah,
So-
it was really weird.
So we talked about, so normative influence and informational influence, right? If someone is conforming and saying that the two lines are the same size, when one is obviously a lot bigger, right? What kind of influence do you think that would be? Informational or normative? Normative. Why?
Because the information is right in front of them, but then
It's obvious.
it's obvious, but
Right.
it's this social view. that's
Right.
important.
And this is just me surmising. But I'm a very intelligent surmiser. And so you might go with it, but privately. So there might be public compliance, but privately you might be like, nah, man, like the line is clearly not the same size. Okay, actually, this is. Let's watch this.
So in that regard, you're like.
Okay, I want to give you a test
I want to
of
give you
your
a test.
visual acuity, your sensitivity to differences in line lengths. So I'm going to show you a standard, and then I'm going to show you 3 comparison lines. One is going to be bigger, one is going to be shorter, and one is going to be the same size as the standard. Your job is, tell me which line, A, B, or C, is the same as the standard.
All right, which one?
Seems like a simple judgment. You always get it right. But now, before you give your answer, there are going to be half dozen to 10 other people like you in the room, and they're going to give their answers first. An amazing thing happens. One after another, they say the line that you see as shorter is the same as the standard. Shorter, 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 shorter. They don't say shorter, they just say B, 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 and so forth. Now it's your turn. You know B is the wrong answer. But what do you say? In this study done by Solomon Asch, a classic study of group conformity, the majority of people gave in on most of the critical trials to agree with, to say publicly that they agreed with the majority. So this study is one of the first classic studies on the power of a group. As long as there's 3 or more people who agree among themselves that reality is not the way you see it, in many cases you give in to see the world in their way. Let's look at that study.
The experiment you'll be taking part in today involves the perception of lengths of lines. As you can see here, I have a number of cards, and on each card there are several lines. Your task is a very simple one. You're to look at the line on the left and determine which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length. All right, we'll proceed in this order. You'll give your answer.
Can we all agree this is a pretty easy task? Okay.
Only one of the people in the group is a real subject, the 5th person with the white t-shirt. The others are confederates of the experimenter and have been told to give wrong answers on some of the trials. The experiment begins uneventfully as subjects give their judgments.
2, 2,
2,
2,
2,
3,
3.
3, 3,
But on the 3rd trial, something happens.
2,
2,
2,
2.
2.
The subject denies the evidence of his own eyes and yields to group influence. Ash found subjects went along with the group on 37% of the critical trials. But he found through interviews that they went along with the group for different reasons.
Different reasons.
One. They must be right. There are 4 of them and 1 of me. 1.
This subject's yielding is based on a distortion of his judgment.
So he said they must be right. There are 4 of them and 1 of me. So what kind of social influence did that someone other than the smart Whitney over here? Over there? Did you have your hand up?
No.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Someone, what kind of, so is it normative or informational influence? He's saying there are 4 of them and just 1 of me. They must be right. Right, so I would say it's informational also, because
It's like a statistical analysis.
he literally is using other people's information to develop his own answer. It would be normative if he was like, well, I don't want them to hate me.
Right.
You know. So keep listening.
He genuinely believes that the group is correct.
1. 2. 1. 2. 2.
I know they're wrong, but why should I make waves?
2.
I know they're wrong, but why should I make waves? Is that informational or normative?
Normative.
Yes, right. He doesn't want to make waves.
In this case, the subject knows he is right, but goes along to avoid the discomfort of disagreeing with the group. Here, the distortion is at the level of his response.
2.
In the previous experiment, the naive subject stood alone against the group. In this variation, Ash gave the naive subject a partner, here seated in the 3rd position.
Okay, so now he does this again with a partner. Okay? And what do you think they're trying to do here? Say that a little bit louder.
Give them reassurance that they are right.
Okay, yeah, so we have the second person, and now this person is going to say the right answer also. And so this is going to probably make it way more likely for the participant to feel confident and also give the right answer.
Who also gives the correct response.
1. 2. 1. 2.
With a partner, yielding drops to only 5% of the critical trials compared to 37% without a partner. Although subjects report warmth and good feeling toward the partner, they typically deny that he played a role in their own independence.
They don't even know what's happening.
The partnership variation shows that much of the power of the group came not merely from its numbers, but from the unanimity of its opposition. When that unanimity is punctured, the group's power is greatly reduced. Sometimes we go along with a group because what they say convinces us they are right. This is called informational conformity. But sometimes we conform because we are apprehensive that the group will disapprove if we are deviant. This is called normative conformity. The strength of the normative factor is shown in another variation carried out by Ash. In this variation, the subject is told that because he had arrived late, you would have to write his answers. Subjects in this private response experiment are exposed to the same amount of misleading information as other subjects, but they are immune from any possible criticism by the group.
1.
And this enormously reduces the pressure to conform. Conformity drops by 2/3. Ash's experiment is a classic. It reveals how people will deny what they say.
So why is conformity dropping by 2/3? What kind of social influence is going away, causing this when he's writing the answer in private? Sorry? Right. But and so think of it in terms of informational versus normative. What is being reduced when he's able to write it down? The normative, right? He no longer feels like I need to give the same answer as everyone else, right? And so if he were to conform to the group, even in the private response, then we know that would be informational social influence happening.
See and submit to group pressure. It allows us not only to observe conformity, but to study the conditions that increase or reduce its occurrence.
Okay.
Doesn't also the amount of people like change as well?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Until looks like this slide says until about 4. I think it's is when it tops off. You said it's 4:15 right now.
Oh no, I'm saying, oh, you're asking
Oh.
me. Sorry.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, you were focused on when the class ends. Yeah.
You said like class, and you said
Gotcha. Yeah.
So is that to say, with big groups, you're less likely to conform or more likely?
No, it's just saying that at a certain point, the bigger group
It doesn't
size
matter.
does not lead to more conformity.
Right.
Yeah. So you'll get the same conformity at 4 people than you might at 40 people. Okay. And so just to give you evidence that not conforming is hard. So they did this mental rotation task. They did the conformity task, but with the mental rotation. They did the conformity paradigm, but with the mental rotation task. But they had participants do it in an fMRI, so you could look at areas of the brain that activate when they were answering. And so when participants went ahead and chose the correct answer, and in doing so disagreed with the group, areas of the brain were activated that dealt with negative emotions and social situations. So pretty much, it hurts not to conform. Okay, the same areas of the brain are activated that would be activated when dealing with negative emotions. Okay, and like I said before, unlike informational social influence, normative pressure doesn't usually result in private acceptance. Yeah, and so normative social influence occurs in everyday life. Okay, we get our female and male body image standards from what we see depicted in amongst our social group and the media. Fashion standards. Although those sunglasses I feel like are pretty cool. Like I don't need Kanye West to tell me this. Sunglasses are cool. In men and women, normative social influence has a really negative impact on body image and can lead to eating disorders and low self-esteem. Steroid use. I feel like the guy on the right, he looks really strong, but gross. Yeah.
We can body shame him.
His
okay?
face isn't as orange as the rest of his body. Yeah. And so this depends on how collectivist the culture is. Does anyone want to take a stab at what might happen in a collectivist culture versus an individualistic culture with conformity, and why? Okay.
Collectivist cultures are going to have higher social conformity
Because
they view themselves as part of the whole.
And so breaking from that
Would be
harder, right? So collectivist cultures see themselves more as part of a group, and so they might be less inclined to deviate.
because their identity is built upon group
Right,
community.
exactly. Okay. So there are factors that predict how likely normative social influences will influence us. And so this gets to this social impact theory, which says that our likelihood to conform depends on the strength of the groups important to us and its immediacy. Okay, so is this a good friend? Is it a best friend? Is it just like a coworker? You know, am I in the same room as this person, or are they texting me? Okay, so strength factors and immediacy factors. I might probably be more likely to conform if my best friend is trying to get me to do something and we're in the same room. But way less likely to conform if a coworker is trying to get me to do something through text, right? Because there's that strength of the friendship and also the immediacy factor. And also the number of people in the group. Although this, like I said, caps off at around four people. So we're far more likely to be, there's a much stronger social influence when we go from 1 to 2 people in a group, and from 2 to 3, and from 3 to 4, but not as much from 4 to 5 or 5 to 6 up until infinity. Propaganda has normative social influence on us. They try and get us to feel and act a certain way using compelling images. So what can we do to resist inappropriate normative social influence? Being aware that it's operating is always a plus when it comes to any kind of social influence.
Just say no, man.
Just say no. The other thing is, and we saw this in the ASH study, is find an ally. Okay. It's way easier to resist if just one other person agrees with you.
Like conformity works in numbers.
Right. Well, in the
Like if you can have a person on your side, then you're gonna be even stronger
totally.
in that opinion.
Like as Ash put it, the strength of the influence comes in the unanimity of the group. So basically, when every other person has the opposite viewpoint as you, the only way you can break that influence is by getting just one other person to break from that viewpoint. So one last thing, and probably most importantly on this slide, is that if you conform most of the time, this gives you a right to deviate, but only sometimes. And this is called idiosyncrasy credits, okay? So you earn tolerance from the group over time by continuously conforming to group norms, okay? So, I'm about to sneeze. Thanks. That's gonna sound great to the online section. So, like I said, like my friends who take their meals right after we order and eat them at home. You know, if I do this over and over and over again, this theory predicts that every once in a while I can be like, no, I don't want to do that. Let's eat here, without them getting too annoyed or rejecting me from the group. Does that make sense to you guys? Pretty clear. Do you have any of your own examples? Uh-huh.
When you get good grades normally, and like whenever you get like one bad grade, and your parents are like, oh, okay, well, it's not that big of a deal. So, sort of.
A little bit different,
Okay.
because you're not going. I can see how that's kind of similar, but more like,
It's like if it was a group activity, like my middle brother like never speaks up for himself, and he always just goes along with whatever we want to do. But last Christmas he didn't want to travel, and so we were like, you never say anything for yourself, so that's okay, even though it's
Right.
sort of sad for us.
right. Yeah, so think of it as when you're doing an activity with other people. So if you're actually doing an activity with your parents or something, you know, like mine, like I don't want to go to Niagara Falls. We always go to Niagara Falls. All right, that was really personal, but sick of Niagara Falls. I grew up in upstate New York, and we were really close to Niagara Falls. Yeah. Okay. So you guys familiar with like what it means to have like a minority opinion? Okay, when you have a viewpoint that's not shared by the majority of the people, and there's only a small group of you. Okay, so it's difficult to influence the majority, but it's possible. And the first way is you have to be consistent in your point of view. Okay, so you can't waver on what you believe in within your group. You have to be a unified front. And the other is it's easier to influence the majority if you're presenting them with objective facts. Okay. So in other words, if you want to influence the majority, you can't use normative social influence on them. Okay. You have to use informational social influence. Normative social influence would not work because there are more people in that group. You know, they don't need your recognition in order to maintain high self-esteem. Okay, you have to appeal to their need to be accurate. Okay.
So what would that say about like the Heaven's Gate cult if you were to try to change their mind or get them to be in the minority opinion that your telescope wasn't broken, there is no.
Right. Yeah.
And present them with all of the objective facts.
So if you were like a small group, a small faction within the Heaven's Gate cult, and you like believed in most of the things they said, but like you weren't down with like killing yourself, and you were trying to like change everyone else's mind, then yeah, I mean, you know, you'd have to appeal to you have to use straight up facts. Like I had a scientist look at this microscope or telescope.
Work? Like,
I don't know.
you know.
I mean, well, there are a lot of things going on in a cult that kind of strengthens group ties, you know, that might make it more difficult to change their opinion.
Because I feel like it wouldn't necessarily work.
Mm-hmm.
You might have to go to one by one.
You guys want to do this group activity? I see people shaking their heads. Or you want to power through?
Let's do it.
Raise your hand if you want to do group activity.
Do it. Yeah.
Raise your hand if you don't. Okay. So, minority group convince the majority group. No, I'm joking. Yeah. Okay. So there are different types of norms that help us behave the way we think we should in society. Okay. One is called injunctive. Okay. Injunctive norm are things that we feel like we shouldn't do and deal with our perceptions of right and wrong and morality. Okay, so we know that we shouldn't talk on the phone loudly in the metro. We know that's just wrong. It's annoying. We don't talk on the phone in the theater, and you try your best not to ride on a grocery cart down a busy aisle. Okay, so injunctive norms, perceptions of what behaviors are right or wrong. Basically what most others approve or disapprove of. But we also have descriptive norms. And this is based on how we see people acting. So this is not necessarily connected to what we think is morally right or wrong, but more how we see people act. What is typical? Example of this are wearing a suit to a job interview. We know that is what people do. It's not necessarily tied to morals or ethics. We know in the United States, at least, that it is right to hold the door open for other people. Okay. Although some people are ridiculous, man, they hold the door open and I'm like 20 feet away. And I'm like, and then I don't see it. I know. I'm like, come on. And like one time I didn't say thank you, and the person said like, you're welcome. You know?
That's me. I'm that person.
But it's so uncomfortable.
Acknowledge.
I'm like, I didn't ask, and then I'm like, now I have to like repay you with a thank you.
So much work.
So much work.
Once you start committing to opening that door, you let it open until that person goes.
Yeah. It's like, yeah.
But also with like social like salutations, like shaking hands in America, like greeting people, like looking them in the eye and shaking their hands is considered like rude in other cultures.
Right. Yeah. Totally. I mean, the way you greet. I mean, in Iranian culture, because I'm Iranian, you like kiss each other on the cheek, like one side and then the other, and then sometimes again, you know. And I don't know when it's 2 times or 3 times, but either way, I'm pretty uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
It's a chicken fight.
Yeah.
Custom. Don't worry, it doesn't get better.
And so, okay, anyways, that's beside the point. Okay, so Cialdini, it's like Reno and Cialdini and Calgary, but Cialdini is the only famous person from this, only person I recognize. Wanted to look at whether injunctive norms or descriptive norms more strongly influenced our behavior. Okay, and he looked at it by examining when people litter. Okay, and so he went to, I think, like a sporting event. Okay, and sometimes the parking lot in the sporting event was clean, and sometimes it was littered. It was littered, and he went to the cars and put like notes on them. You know, like ads. You know, typically you just like take it off the windshield and you crumble it up and you never look at it again. Okay, but while people were walking to their cars, he had a Confederate walk in front of them, and that Confederate either went to a car, took the note off, and crumpled it up and littered it, or he took the note and brought it in the car with him. Or no, that's not right. Either, okay. Sorry, I'm gonna start over. The Confederate either took the note, crumpled it up, and trashed it, or actually picked up a piece of trash from the ground. Okay, so the Confederate either litters or picks up trash in either a clean or littered parking lot. Okay, and so the descriptive norm here is when the Confederate litters. Okay, because you're watching someone do something that might be typical. And the injunctive norm here is when the Confederate picks up a piece of litter, okay, because that's telling people that littering is bad. That's why I'm picking up the trash. And so they were looking at whether based on whether the Confederate litters or picks up trash in a clean or empty parking lot, would someone who is watching that trash the note on their car or take it home to throw away. Okay, and what they found is that 37% of people littered no matter what. Okay, but that when the Confederate littered, it also caused the participants to litter, but only when the parking lot was already trashed. Okay. Why do you think participants didn't litter more when the parking lot was clean? Only when it was trashed.
When it's trashed, it's like the environment is already that way, so it's like socially others have already seen it that way.
Yeah, maybe. It might also be that when the parking lot was clean and you saw someone litter, it made you realize that the littering is bad.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
Let me finish. That was the next thing that I was gonna say. But yeah, because they're like normatively, you would see a disjunction of the litter and the clean shapes.
Right. And so when the Confederate does clean, it did not matter whether the parking lot was dirty or not. Okay, people decreased littering no matter what. Okay, and God, that experiment's like almost impossible to explain clearly.
Was this here in America?
I think so, because Cialdini is an American psychologist. You guys have questions on that experiment? Lost.
Does diffusion of responsibility also play a role into that by any chance?
Sure. I'm sure that people would be less likely to
Like clean if they saw someone else clean?
people might be less likely to clean if they saw other people around in general, right? 'Cause you might feel less responsible. But keep in mind that in this experiment, they watched as people went to their own cars, and had, and everyone had like a little slip of paper in the windshield.
Okay, well, I meant more for, unless I missed something, more if the parking lot was like trashed,
Oh.
and somebody littered.
Right. Yeah. Right. So would someone pick up that piece of trash?
Or would somebody feel more guilty about littering
Okay.
if they saw somebody else littering,
Okay.
and they littered themselves because the parking lot's already trashed?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm just not sure that's diffusion of responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Just wanna be sure
I mean,
I
it's
understood that.
definitely really related. Yeah.
No, I was thinking that.
Okay. So the takeaway here is that descriptive norm needs to be salient to impact behavior. So behavior is only impacted here when the Confederate dropped trash in the clean parking lot. And the other takeaway here is that injunctive norms are stronger because people decrease littering, whether or not the Confederate picked up trash in a clean or dirty parking lot. Whitney?
Can you define injunctive norm again?
Yeah, sure. So that's when we don't do or do something because it's related to like our perceptions of what's right or wrong. Okay. So when you see someone pick up a piece of trash from the ground, that's telling you that littering is bad. So that's an injunctive norm. Descriptive norm is more when we do or don't do something based on just what we observe people to do, and what we observe people do, but it's not necessarily related to like morals or
So like
ethics.
injunctive is not behavior viewed as like socially unacceptable. It's like
So that it is, I would say,
it is.
it is related to what we see as like acceptable. No. I got social confused with like moral. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But like morally acceptable versus unacceptable.
That's like injunctive. Yeah,
Okay.
that's how I see it. There's a descriptive norm boomerang effect. If you make a point about what people normally do, it may cause good behavior to worsen. Okay. So, for example, you tell people, you're like you're trying to get people to stop drinking, so you tell them the average college student drinks 3 drinks a night. Okay. And so what happens is that all the people who drink more than 3 drinks might think, man, I should drink less. However, all the people who drink less than 3 drinks might be like, oh, like I'm not even drinking the average amount, and they start drinking more. Okay, it's the boomerang effect. Okay. Is that true? 3 drinks a night?
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. But maybe it's like spread out over a week. Maybe it's like,
What is exactly a drink? Like
Alcoholic drink.
Well, no, as in like the amount that is fully considered like a full drink.
Like a glass of wine or a beer.
Okay.
yeah, or shot,
Or a shot.
beer,
Yeah.
But like,
glass of wine.
it's just like when you look at all those different amounts, they all equal a drink.
Yeah.
And it's just like everybody's opinion of what a drink
Right, that's
is
fair.
also subjective.
That's fair.
And however, typically, like with these like scientific, sort of studies, that's like always the norm of their like,
Yeah.
their typical.
You guys are all 21, right?
No.
You guys are being recorded. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about it. Obedience to authority. Okay. As we've learned, this is one of the most powerful types of social influence. And it makes sense that we would be programmed to be obedient to authority. Without law, there'd be chaos. Okay, so kind of automatically see authority figures as legitimate, and this can cause problems. You guys familiar with Milgram?
Yeah.
Milgram study? I was talking about this today with someone. We've kind of already talked about obeying orders. Okay, so anyone who doesn't know, Milgram pretty much set up this mock learning task in which everyone was a Confederate except for this one participant. Okay. So the participant comes in and he says, and the experimenter tells him that they're gonna do this learning task with someone in another room, and it's a memorization task. The person in the other room has to memorize like a list of words, and and every time they get the answer wrong, you're gonna deliver an electric shock. Okay, but the electric shocks are gonna get stronger and stronger. Okay, and so if you're the participant, it is made obvious to you that after enough, like increasing levels of electric shocks, you're gonna kill the person in the other room. Okay. But you have this experimenter over your shoulder telling you, no, we must continue. We must continue with the experiments. And so what we're looking at is, does the participant stop before he hypothetically kills the participants? Only because the obedience figure tells him to keep going. Okay. And pretty much we find that 2/3 of participants would have actually killed this person in the other room only because someone is telling them to. Okay. Let's watch this. Oh, come on. Like I'm not going to find this. All right, guys. Yeah. All I had to type was Milgra. Full documentary.
In a unique period from the early 60s to the early 70s, a group of social scientists conducted a series of
Okay, first of all, social psychology in the 60s was not like this dancing and dancing around.
That's what we're
Yeah. Rock and roll and okay, I just want to make that clear.
Experiments examining the nature of human behavior and its relationship to social conventions and situations.
In this setting, I allow things to be done to me that I wouldn't allow in any other context. Dentist is about to put an electric drill into my mouth.
Particularly fascinated with the dangers of group behavior and blind obedience to authority.
What is there in human nature that allows an individual to act without any restraints whatsoever, so that he can act inhumanely, harshly, severely, and in no way limited by feelings of compassion or conscience? These are questions.
But he might be dead in there. The experiment requires that you continue teaching. 330 volts.
The experiments that Milgram and others conducted were controversial, and for ethical reasons may never be conducted again. Yet the results of those experiments remain groundbreaking, profoundly revealing about the tensions between the individual and society, and increasingly relevant to contemporary life. In 1962, Stanley Milgram shocked the world with his study on obedience.
Shocked the world.
To test his theories, he invented an that would become a window into human cruelty. In ascending order, a row of buttons marked the amount of voltage one person would inflict upon another. Milgram's original motive for the experiment was to understand the unthinkable, how the German people could permit the extermination of the Jews.
When I learn of incidents such as the massacre of millions of men, women, and children perpetrated by the Nazis in World War II, how is it possible, I ask myself, that ordinary people, who are courteous and decent in everyday life, can act callously?
Also, that's not Milgram. That's just a bozo.
Inhumanely, without any limitations of conscience. Now, there are some studies in my discipline, social psychology, that seem to provide a clue to this question. The problem I wanted to study was a little different. It went a little bit further. It was the issue of authority. Under what conditions would a person obey authority who commanded actions that went against conscience? These are exactly the questions that I wanted to investigate at Yale University.
It is May 1962. An experiment is being conducted in the Elegant Interaction Laboratory at Yale University. The subjects are 40 males between the ages of 20 and 50 residing in the greater New Haven area.
Psychologists have developed several theories to explain how people learn. One theory is that people learn things correctly whenever they get punished for making a mistake.
40 years later, Milgram's infamous experiment, obedience, is still taught in classrooms around the world.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. All right, now the next thing we'll have to do is set the learner up so that he can get some sort of punishment.
What inspired Milgram, I would say there were a number of factors. One of them is he was very ambitious. He wanted to make a mark in social psychology. And he wanted, as he wrote to one friend, he wanted to come up with the boldest experiment that he could think of.
Would you roll up your right sleeve, please? This electrode is connected to the shock generator in the next room. And this electrode paste is to provide a good contact to avoid any blister or burn. Do you have any questions now before we go into the next room?
About 2 years ago, I was at the Veterans Hospital in West Haven. And while there, they detected a heart condition. There's nothing serious, but as long as I'm having these shocks, how strong are they? How dangerous are they?
Well, no, although they may be painful, they're not dangerous. Anything else?
No, that's all.
All right, teacher, would you take the test and be seated in front of the shock generator, please, in the next room?
But the experiment was rigged.
The victim was an accomplice of the experiment. The victim, according to plan, provided many wrong answers. His verbal responses were standardized on tape, and each protest was coordinated to a particular voltage level on the shock generator.
Now, as teacher, you were seated in front of this impressive-looking instrument, the shock generator. Its essential feature is a line of switches that goes from 15 volts to 450 volts, and a set of verbal designations that goes from slight shock to moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock, intense shock, extreme intensity shock, and finally XXX, danger severe shock. Your job, the experimenter explains to you, is a word pair test. If he gets each answer correctly, fine, you move on to the next pair. But if he makes a mistake, you are instructed to give him an electric shock, starting with 15 volts, and you increase the shock one step on each error.
Incorrect. You'll now get a shock of 105. Hard hit. Just how far can you go in this thing? As far as is necessary. What do you mean as far as is necessary?
Milgram was very much aware that obedience is a necessary ingredient for society to function. But he focused on the darker side of obedience.
Incorrect. 150 volts. Sad face.
Wait a minute. That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble. My heart's starting to bother me now.
It's absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice, teacher. Oh, I have a lot of choices. My number one choice is that I wouldn't go on if I thought he was being harmed.
Now this man makes disobedience seem a very rational and simple deed. Now other subjects respond quite differently to the experimenter's authority.
Wrong. It's hair. 75 volts, Jim. You don't know that. Please continue.
Some psychologists were troubled by the ethics of it. Many, if not most subjects, found it a highly stressful, conflicted experience. People are stammering, stuttering, laughing hysterically and inappropriately.
150 volts.
Experiment. That's all. Get me out of here. Who said I have my trouble? My heart's starting to bother me now. Get me out of here, please. Let me out of here. You have no right to keep me here. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out.
Continue, please.
Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let
Go
me
on.
out. Let me out.
Clearly, when we say people went to the top of the shock board, it wasn't like they were going blithely, sadistically. People went stop and go, stop and go. They were in a state of conflict, which was created a tremendous amount of stress. So that was the main critique.
This will be at 3:30.
As his voice began to show increasing frustration, so did I. And I was really in a state of real conflict and agitation. One of Stanley Milgram's basic contributions was that you don't ask people what they would do given this hypothetical situation. You put them in the situation.
Wrong. 180 volts. Please continue, teacher. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man there.
According to Milgram, one of the things that's a prerequisite for carrying out acts that are evil is to shed responsibility from your shoulders and hand it over to the person in charge.
I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next was slow.
He didn't hold any gun to anybody's head. Just the fact that he conveyed a sense of authority. Roughly 60-65% of the people went all the way to the top of the shock board.
450 volts. That's it.
Now continue using the last switch on the board, please. The 450 switch for each wrong answer. Continue.
I'm not getting no answer. Don't the man's health mean anything?
Whether the learner likes it or not, we
But
must...
he might be dead in there.
Milgram made the point, I think very effectively, that the Nazis weren't all a bunch of psychopaths at Belsen and Dachau. Half a death camp from the middle class in New Haven.
Well, who was actually pushing the switch?
I was. But he kept insisting. I told him no, but he said he got to keep going.
What kind of obedience would Milgram get today if he were to do the experiment today?
Probably about the same.
Probably about the same. Why?
I don't know. I think people are just inherently obedient. It just really shows like how far human beings will go to appease what they perceive to be an authority figure.
Milgram has identified one of the constants, one of the universals of social behavior. The readiness to obey authority cuts across time. It's a constant. The other outstanding and distinctive thing about the obedience experiment is how much it has and keeps on permeating contemporary culture and thought. It's still with us in very, very important ways.
Okay, guys, we'll finish next week.